Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get to it. First question. If mass moves mass and absolute strength is generally greater when at a heavier body weight in the untrained, how relevant is this case for trained individuals, and at what point is there diminished returns? For example, with all training and dietary variables equal, will a 100 kilogram identical twin be considerably weaker than his 150 kilogram brother, assuming they both have trained in bulk for the same amount of time and only one brother choose to gain 50% more weight per week? All right, this is a pretty extreme hypothetical that you asked here, but yeah, let's take your question seriously. Let's say two guys started at a lower body weight. Let's say two identical twins started at, 60 kilos, and they decided to bulk. And because they ate so much food, one of them bulked to 100 kilos over the course of however many months or years it was, and the other bulked to 150 kilos using similar types of programs. Will the heavier one, who's 50 kilos, remember guys, that's 110 pounds, be stronger? Yeah, he will be dramatically stronger. Number one, because he had more training fuel. He way overate, and his training numbers would have increased quicker, particularly his pressing numbers due to more training fuel, as well as the actual anabolic effects of food. That's one of the things that you guys need to remember. That food itself is anabolic, even when you overeat to the point of where you're gaining fat, and it's because you're going to get more IGF-1 in your muscles, more total insulin response. There's a lot of factors involved hormonally that's going to cause someone who's gaining weight faster to gain more muscle. So having more body fat in general, with similar all other factors equal that you've gained from overeating, will usually equal more muscle mass. The problem is that the other guy is, while he might have a little more muscle, he is also going to have a lot more fat, dramatically more fat, and he's going to have a much higher body fat percentage. So his relative strength is probably going to be lower, but his absolute strength will be higher, meaning his kilo per kilo or pound per pound strength will be lower, but he will be lifting more weight, definitely more weight than the other because of the same genetics and similar training program. Now, that being said, again, remember, you need to remember this is, you're going to gain a lot more fat this way, and once they cut down to the same body weight, because the 150 kilo one has gained so much more body fat, he's probably going to lose the additional muscle and then some that he gained. And that's something that people need to remember. A fatter person will hold more muscle mass. That's why when we talk about fat-free mass index, we're only talking about people who had a certain level of leanness. When we talk about if it's obtainable drug-free or not, it is possible to have a higher fat-free mass index than what a lot of us are saying is the natural limit if you have more body fat. So those are only for very lean people, because again, a fat person can simply gain more muscle mass and hold more muscle mass because of all of the hormonal factors and the padding against losing muscle mass due to the extra calories and body fat and things. So yeah, he's going to be a lot stronger and he's going to have more muscle mass, but again, he's going to have a much, much higher body fat percentage. All right, next question. Love the informative content, Jason. I'm wondering what your opinion is on kettlebell programs like Pavel's Simple and Sinister for someone who is weak but trains martial arts regularly. Is a GPP program like this a good start, or is there a better barbell program for a beginner who does year-round sports martial arts or is military? Thanks. All right, something that needs to be remembered when it comes to this kettlebell training stuff. Kettlebells are fine and very useful for GPP, which is general physical preparedness, but in terms of building actual strength and muscle mass, they cannot compete with barbells or even dumbbells. You got to remember, if you're trying to use them for that purpose, that's just a trendy thing that's been brought about. They're actually inferior tools for your specific training for size and strength, particularly strength and power, because you can't do as much with them. They're less versatile. You basically get stuck with 30 different kettlebells that are big hunks of iron that you can't adjust, that take up a lot of space, and you can't microload the same way you can with barbells to run very specific training programs. You're stuck with very few types of grips you can use on them. So a smaller diversity of exercises, and particularly smaller diversity of the big, heavy exercises. So you need to understand that these are purely for GPP. This is general physical preparedness, and they're very valuable tools for that because you don't need a lot of different weights. You don't need to be able to microload, and you don't need the diversity of training. So they're fine, but just remember, you can't compare the two. They're not even remotely comparable for building overall strength and power. It's just, you can't, due to the versatility you have with the barbell. They're a superior tool, both in terms of programming and even space and money spent. All right, next question. Can it be deemed impractical for certain people to maintain a lean physique? For instance, in my last cut, I eventually had to decrease my calories to 1500 with heavy cardio sessions 7 days a week to achieve a fairly low body weight percentage, 12 to 14%. How can one be expected to maintain such leanness, as eating so little calories with such high activity is not sustainable nor healthy? Well, the truth is you can't maintain a really, really low body fat percentage drug-free and in a healthy way for long periods of time. And you got to remember that's different for different people. For a lot of guys, I always say it's about 10%. In your case, it was 12 to 14. Yeah, you can't do that and be healthy long term. It is going to wear your body down, beat your body up to maintain very low calories with a high activity level. And that is what is required to maintain a really, really low body fat percentage. And it's something guys aren't factoring in who are doing this. They don't seem to realize they're not going to be able to do this long term, and unless they're just really genetically lean. And those people don't have to work hard to be ripped. They don't have to. It comes to them easy genetically. They have lower appetites than other people, and they tend to be more hyperactive than other people. It comes to them natural. For everyone else, it's going to require continual work and a continual strain on your body that is going to beat you up over time. So that's something this fitness community doesn't seem to understand or promote or make clear to a lot of young guys. And yeah, it's going to get a lot of young guys hurt. And it's exactly the things that you noted. You are having to restrict your calories a lot and do a lot more activity than you really wanted to do in order to get there, and it's going to be the same to maintain it. So what you need to find is a comfortable body fat percentage that you can be at while eating a reasonable diet and while having the activity level that you want. And people need to remember that activity level is going to vary from person to person. There are people who genuinely enjoy training for an hour every day, and they actually really enjoy it, and it brings meaning to their life. And so they're going to probably be able to maintain a little lower of a body fat percentage than someone who doesn't, while still maintaining their health and doing the things that they enjoy as far as their activities. But it's not going to be dramatically lower. They're still not going to be 8% body fat year round, no matter what they think or what they might claim. That will even beat them up eventually. So good point, and people need to be more aware of that. All right, next question. Why am I stronger off the floor than when I do rack pulls? I do my rack pulls just below the knee, and they are a new exercise for me. 80% of my normal deadlift intensity feels almost impossible to lift from the rack. All right, simply put, because the leverages are different. There's more than one type of rack pull. There is a type of rack pull that people do they can lift 100 or even 200 pounds more than they normally can because they've dramatically reduced the range of motion and they've gone above the knee, which lets them pull back easier and use better body mechanics. So the leverages are easier in addition to the range of motion being greatly reduced. In your case, you've only reduced the range of motion just slightly, and you've lost a leverage advantage to going just below the knee. And what you're doing is actually really common. A lot of guys lift less weight. The majority do when they pull from below the knee on a low rack pull like that. And it's because they haven't been able to adjust leverages to benefit. But you need to remember, make sure you're using it as an accessory exercise because it's there to help you get a little more power from close to the bottom for people who slow down a little immediately off the floor, who don't get enough speed. Don't use it to replace your normal deadlift because you will lose overall strength because you're being forced to use a lighter weight through a slightly lighter range of motion. So it's not going to be ideal for maintaining your muscle mass or your overall strength. It's an accessory tool that's used to help you with a certain performance component. It's a very, very useful accessory for that, but please just don't try to use it to replace your normal deadlift, because if you do, you might find that your normal deadlift will reduce because, again, you're using a lower range of motion with less weight because of the nature of the exercise. All right, next question. Would you consider the overhead press to be an important assistance movement to the bench press? I have gotten stuck at a bench press of 165 kilos, but I am very weak on the overhead press. Could my bench increase if I focused on getting my overhead press stronger, or is there no correlation? Actually, I remember this poster. I recognized his name. I met this individual at the British Grand Prix. He was a Swedish power lifter. So good to see you again, brother. All right, as far as answering your question, yeah, the overhead press is a fantastic accessory for the bench press. So if you've been stuck for a while on the bench press at 165 kilos, and I already know I've met you, you're a big dude already. So yeah, you'll find that the improved power in your triceps and interior deltoids from really focusing on your overhead press, if you haven't been, will probably push you past that plateau because you're adding in an accessory that is a massive mass and strength builder for primary movers, some of the primary movers in the exercise. And if they're what's holding you back, and if you're not strong in the overhead press, they probably are what's holding you back, then you should see a significant improvement from adding them in and getting stronger on it. So I would definitely try it, particularly if you've been plateaued a little while there, because I think it'll help you come up to that next level. So definitely work on your overhead press for a phase for a few months and see if that helps push you forward. And guys, the reason I say a few months, a lot of people are like, really that long? He's a very advanced lifter. He's a big guy. He's an advanced lifter, competes at the international level in powerlifting. So you don't make massive increases in short periods of time anymore at that point. That's the real world. So hopefully people understand that we're talking about an advanced lifter here. Yeah, it could take him months of adding an accessory to see any positive change. All right, next question. You said teens till about 21 years should not cut unless obese. They should recomp at most. But what if a teen got outside the healthy BMI range you still have been talking about lately? Should he get cut to get to the healthier BMI range? Thanks. All right, this is going to be a slightly controversial answer because a lot of people aren't going to understand that we are talking purely about drug-free people, not guys who gained huge amounts of muscle from using gear. And the thing is, if he's under 21 years old and he has gained huge amounts of muscle from using gear, he's already suffered all the negative effects he's going to get from cutting anyway. So cutting and bulking is no longer a health concern for someone who's already suppressed all their natural hormone levels. It's the cutting, its negative impact on your body's growth and your hormones is the concern. So for this individual, I'm going to say, assuming he's drug-free, because otherwise there's no point in addressing this question, yeah, if you've gone outside the normal BMI range, you're probably holding an extra body fat. And holding that extra body fat at a young age is going to tend to affect you in the long term. So yes, there are still health consequences to cutting if you're under 21. If you're 19 years old and you're a male and you start cutting and losing body weight any significant amount, it will potentially harm your overall growth and development, your long-term hormone production, sex hormones, things like that. So that's why I don't advise it. Don't get ripped or lean as a teenager. It's a bad idea for your long-term development. Now, that being said, it is also a risk to your health to be overweight and carry extra body fat to your long-term health and development and everything else. So in that case, it's a factor of saying, okay, is the risk to my development and hormone production worth having a heart attack over in 25 years? The answer is no. So obviously, if you've drifted outside the normal BMI range, so you say you're 10 pounds over and you're 19 years old or whatever, then yeah, go ahead and do a cut to get back inside the normal BMI range, but do not do it to get ripped. Do it just to get back there. So if you need to drop 12 pounds to be at the normal BMI range, you go ahead and cut and drop 12 pounds and maybe even an extra pound or two just so you're inside that ideal range, because your overall health is going to be better for it. And yeah, it's still going to risk stunting your growth. It's still going to risk stunting your development just slightly, a very, very small risk. But in this case, your long-term health is more important. All right, next question. And this is the last question of the week. Hey Jason, what is your opinion on the rising laziness and hate towards the barbell squat lately for athletic and powerful legs? It seems like more and more YouTube celebrities are now trashing squats and promoting these fuck-around-itis exercises like bodyweight pistol squats, etc. Are these exercises really enough to replace the squat and improve sprinting and jumping capability? To me, they just seem like an excuse for people who don't want to train legs. Love to hear your opinion. I think in general, what you see with YouTube fitness celebrities, and yeah, I'm going to go ahead and trash people a little bit, they do promote laziness, but they still want to try to come in and do tons of fluff and fuck around itis, and they all use drugs to get there anyway. So all these guys are on tons of drugs, even claiming to be natty, because you can't make it in YouTube fitness. A very tiny percentage of guys who maybe started a long time ago, who already established a big fan base before YouTube fitness became big. Like if you got to 100,000 subscribers before YouTube fitness really blew up and became competitive like it is now, you're probably okay. But everyone else, you have to use drugs to be competitive in this. And many times they claim natty, but they're on drugs. So they get away with all the fuck around itis and they end up building good show muscles between drugs and fluff. But if they're actually trying to get big and powerful, any of these guys who are throwing away the heavy barbell movements in general to try to replace it with fluff and fuck around itis are basically being lazy about it. And it's okay to be lazy as long as you admit that those goals aren't important to you. But when they're saying, oh, we're doing it to get big and powerful, they're full of shit. They're not trying to get big and powerful. They're just trying to do something and not train legs and basically just promote enough to make their money on YouTube, because this is a big business. There are plenty of people making 6 and 7 figures in YouTube fitness. So yeah, they are just doing that so that they can be doing something and not be made fun of. But the reality is, yeah, they are being lazy about it. If their goal is actually to be powerful and explosive, they are being lazy. It's as simple as that. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time. Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it is time for the Q&As, and as usual I'm going to break these up into 2 parts, and then I'm going to do a part 3 for the Gear Talk Q&A. So let's go ahead and get this started. First question. When we say do not mix high and low reps in the same session, does this count for the body as a whole? Or could we do, say, heavy triples on squat and 12 plus reps on the bench and chins for one session, and 20 rep squats and heavy triples on the bench and pin lays and others? Would this mess with the adaptations also? All right, good question. As far as that messing with the adaptations, of course it has the potential to mess with the adaptations, because there is a systematic response as far as central nervous system fatigue. But a lot of the actual metabolic fatigue that we're talking about is specific to individual muscles. So as far as a negative effect on the adaptation from the training, a lot of that isn't about affecting the adaptation. It's about affecting the recovery curve of each type of training and reducing the performance in the next training session, meaning requiring more time before you fully recover. So someone who's training at a suboptimal frequency isn't going to suffer negative effects from this at all. The people who are going to suffer negative effects from the mixed rep ranges are people who are trying to train at an ideal training frequency in order to facilitate maximum adaptation, and that's the difference. It doesn't affect your training negatively in each individual session from actually mixing them. It affects recovery time of different systems, and that's your problem with it. So as far as that goes, potentially the really heavy triples on the big compounds could affect your ability to do the next session in some way, but the metabolic fatigue muscle to muscle is totally different. So again, you're only concerned with the fatigue from the high reps for the individual muscles working. The negative effects from the heavier ones are going to be more systematic. So it gets a little complicated when you want to train it that way, but it honestly isn't going to be that bad, because you're actually mixing the different body parts to some extent with that. You're going to have a greatly reduced negative effect as far as that's concerned. So I would say if you want to train that way and you're not trying to push some extreme frequency or ride that bleeding edge of training frequency for maximum progress, I would say that doing it the way you're talking about is probably going to be okay. You might see some minor negative effects as far as the recovery curve goes doing it that way, but it's not going to be very large. It's going to be very minimal. Again, mainly because you're not overlapping the same body parts. It's when you come in and you try to do high rep squats behind heavy squats or something like that in the same day that you're really going to run into problems. Or you take too many of the smaller support muscles and fatigue them. For example, you take heavy bench press and you do too much high rep tricep work, it's going to affect your ability to train your triceps again sooner. And that's going to affect your big lifts that use the triceps. So that's your big concern. But by mixing them the way you're doing them, you're less likely to have any sort of adaptation problems as a result of recovery affecting your training frequency. All right, next question. I know you're not a fan of pre-workouts, but what are your thoughts on using them only during powerlifting meets, which would be up to 3 times a year? I would never use them during regular training sessions, but a powerlifting meet where it's ideal to be hyped up as possible is a different beast. Or would it be better to just use coffee instead, or Red Bull, or some kind of energy drink? All right, that's not a straightforward answer. I do agree with the premise you have there that on meet day, everything goes. Everything goes that isn't going to make you fail a drug test, but you didn't say if it was drug tested or not. If you compete in any sort of drug tested sport, including powerlifting, you should never, ever, ever put a fucking pre-workout into your body. I don't give a fuck how clean you think it is. So many pre-workouts have been caught spiking meth analogs and other stuff in them that anyone who is a drug-tested athlete who is stupid enough to take a pre-workout deserves to get pop and kicked out of their federation. They're just being a fucking idiot when they know this stuff gets spiked with drugs. In fact, over the over-the-counter supplements in general for drug-tested athletes are a very, very bad idea unless you have access to a lab yourself and you can get each new tub that you buy of something tested. If you're a drug-tested athlete and you use over-the-counter supplements, you're really potentially fucking yourself. Really bad idea. Now, if you are not a tested powerlifter, you compete in untested powerlifting, maybe, but again, you need to really look at them closer and figure out what's in those. I say the idea of it is fine, but you need to make sure that there's nothing in there that's going to cause you cramping, that's going to mess with your fluid balance and things like that. And that's why for a lot of guys, it might be safer to just use caffeine. Just use caffeine to hype yourself up. Black coffee. But again, don't get too dehydrated with the black coffee. You need to be getting fluids in, so maybe even consider caffeine pills, again, within limits, but you need to know how your body's going to react to those caffeine pills in a competition environment also. I would lean in the direction of, instead of a pre-workout, which you don't always know how the mix is going to affect you because of the proprietary blends and things, and not always knowing specifically what they're putting in it, caffeine itself might be a better option as far as the stimulant end goes. But remember, guys, everything kind of goes in an untested powerlifting meet and over-the-counter pre-workout is so far behind the curve for guys who are really trying to win, because I've seen guys actually inject adrenaline and shit at a meet before. I've seen someone take a syringe and inject adrenaline before they compete. Guys use tons of gear before they come out there. Some guys just use mind-boggling amounts of orals on meet day. You see some crazy stuff happening anyway, so it is kind of an anything goes. So I'm going to leave that to you and your coach to figure out what you want to do there. But again, I would be leery of proprietary blends in which you don't know everything in there and how it's going to affect you, fluid balance, things like that. So you're going to have to weigh that out yourself. All right, next question. When progressing, will you get the most out of the training session if you're ready to increase the weight, but you only increase it 5 pounds, even though you know that you can handle a 10-pound increase? Will increasing that 5 pounds ensure the maximum amount of growth, or will only be a percentage of the possible benefit that you could have received if you would have increased it by 10 pounds? In theory, I know that the small increments are better for the long term because you're more likely to keep making small jumps rather than large jumps. Thanks. All right, good question. I lean in the direction of the smaller jumps, and here's why. I'm a big fan of microloading because here's what it ultimately comes down to. If you increase the weight on the bar 2 pounds, 3 pounds, 5 pounds, any small amount, but you are increasing your total workload with it, meaning you're getting some overload there, you are going to stimulate probably maximum growth from that training session. As long as your actual workload in the training session is sufficient to stimulate maximum growth, even small changes in weights with micro loading and even little bitty micro plates. I recommend people buy magnets and if they have to, or use the little bitty micro plates to load with. In fact, a lot of female lifters and lighter males who aren't as big yet, I recommend them going and buying those little 1 1/4 micro loading plates. Sometimes they only need to go up 2.5 pounds on a lift. That is enough to stimulate maximum growth if workload is sufficient. And so yeah, I'm a big fan of micro loading for people who aren't running big block style periodization, who are still doing linear progression purely for that purpose, because you can sustain the linear progression longer before you need to do weight resets and things like that. And the longer you can sustain linear progression, exactly as you said there, the longer you're going to be able to extend out your gains. It's usually in your best interest. I'm a big fan of micro loading like that, because remember guys, at the end of the day, it's not always about, oh, I could have increased the weight on the bar more. Yeah, maybe you could have, but if you increase it any measurable amount, even 2 pounds, 3 pounds, 5 pounds, and you still had sufficient workload to stimulate nearly maximum progress or maximum adaptation, it's not going to matter that you only increase it a small amount. You're still going to progress off of it, and you're going to progress at a very solid rate. So don't worry about that. Trying to push everything to the bleeding edge all the time is how people get burned out. That's how they get overuse injuries. It's not actually necessary to maximize your progress to ride that bleeding edge all the time. It just isn't necessary, and sometimes it can be downright foolish. There's no point in it. So 5-pound jumps, even for a novice lifter, is more than acceptable on your big lifts. You can make maximum gains doing it that way. All right, next question. Hey Jason, I've been lifting for around 5 years, squat 205 kilos, deadlift 240 kilos, and bench 140 kilos. Actually, that's pretty solid. Recently, I'm losing a bit of passion for resistance training and have been doing some road cycling. Nothing crazy, 2-hour rides maximum. As long as calories are sufficient, would cycling be a benefit or a hindrance to my resistance training? Thanks. Fantastic question. Adding significant amounts of list cardio regularly to someone who is primarily a strength-based athlete. Now, I'm going to call you a strength athlete. I mean, you're squatting 205 kilos. You've got a solid bench, deadlift, all of that, 5 years of training. We'll call you a strength athlete, no matter whether you compete or not. It can hurt you initially. The way that works, initially, sometimes the additional adaptations you're subjecting your body to, the additional workload, can make your strength regress just slightly for a little while. However, in the long term, the extra work capacity that you gain from the endurance work, the list cardio, the extra capillarization in your muscle tissue, and the ability to clear waste products more efficiently will, over time, maybe 6 months to 9 months down the road, actually benefit you as a lifter. And that's the way you have to look at it. That's one of those things that in the short term will actually cause you to regress sometime. Your squat might go down 10 kilos as a result of it for a few months. But in the long term, it will help you recover more efficiently. And you might find that even though you lose that 10 kilos off your squat, you might find 9 months or a year down the road that you gain 15 kilos. And when you're an advanced lifter like you are, being able to net a 5 kilo gain over a year on a big lift like the squat is considered very successful. So what's going to end up happening is, look at it that way. The pendulum's going to swing both ways on it. It's going to hurt you at first, and it's going to swing back the other way, and it's going to help you because it's going to make you more efficient at recovery. And list cardio is amazing for doing that. That's why I recommend everyone do list cardio, particularly strength athletes. That's why I do a lot of it. Everyone's like, well, why aren't you ripped if you do cardio every day? And it's like, because I'm not doing cardio to get ripped. I'm still eating food, lots of food. I do it for the health benefits and the recovery benefits and the work capacity benefits. And that's going to help make you stronger in the long term. So definitely keep doing it. But remember, you're playing the long game by adding in the lists, not the short game. All right, next question. Jason, I want to try a cycling ketogenic diet for general health. I've read up on it, and I think it's something I would like to try. I know you made a video saying that straight keto is not good for building muscle and optimal performance. Does the same go for CKD? Thanks, brother. Love the vids. I'm really not sure what you mean by the health benefits. Ketogenic diets are useful for people with certain medical conditions. If you have one of those medical conditions, it's absolutely worth trying. I happen to have a medical condition that is sometimes helped by ketogenic diets, and I mess with them. But a lot of the health benefits that you're trying to get from a ketogenic diet are going to be offset by running the CKD. So I'm not really sure what you're trying to achieve here. As far as ketogenic diets being better for health than just a general balanced diet, there's no evidence whatsoever that they improve health in any way over a balanced diet. In some ways they can equal it, but they don't improve upon it. So I don't understand exactly what you're doing. You need to clarify that and specify what you mean by that. Now, the cycling ketogenic diet is done to offset the performance hit that you get from a straight ketogenic diet. For people who are doing these for body composition purposes, that's the reason for running a CKD. It has nothing to do with your health or medical issues or anything. It is purely a body composition tool for people who lose weight and body fat easily on ketogenic diets because of the appetite control. For people who compete in weight classes in strength sports and things, who do very well on a keto diet, the CKD is fantastic for that. It's a body composition tool for athletes. Nothing more, nothing less. It's not going to improve your health in any way. Again, most of the medical issues that you might have that would benefit from a ketogenic diet, you're going to offset those slightly by running the cycling one. It may interfere with that a little bit, like epilepsy, various autoimmune issues, things like that. So I don't understand exactly what you're trying to achieve here. Maybe you've misread some stuff. People have taught you some incorrect information about it. All right, next question. Hey Jason, I'm 35 years old and only just began taking weightlifting more seriously about a year ago. Is lifting 6 days a week a bad idea for someone my age? Considering same volume is what I would normally do on a 3-day full body, but spread out evenly over 6 days, upper lower split instead. Is that too much for my age? Is the risk of not managing my fatigue too high with such a high frequency? Yeah, I think the risk of fatigue is too high with what you're doing, particularly at your age. There's a reason I recommend full body programs 3 to 4 days a week for most people, particularly drug-free people, is because they can push sufficient workload to stimulate all the adaptations and growth that they want while giving themselves plenty of recovery time, particularly their connective tissue recovery time. The only benefit to training more than 3 to 4 days a week is training for specific lifts, meaning you're performing specific exercises every single day, which you won't be doing on a split routine. You'll be performing specific exercises every single day to improve your neural efficiency and skills at those exercises. And so, for example, Bulgarian style training, where you're training a training max every single day. You're not coming in and doing large amounts of volume with those training maxes. You're training your motor patterns to hit maxes every single day over and over and over. Doing a 6-day-a-week training to where you're actually coming in and splitting the whole body up and an upper lower, where you're probably doing all sorts of various exercises spread out over 6 days because of the way it's going to affect connective tissue, because a lot of your upper body exercises are going to hit the lower body, a lot of lower body exercises are going to hit the upper body. You are going to be putting large amounts of fatigue and micro tearing on your connective tissue and your joints over and over and over. It's one thing when you're coming in doing very low volumes or very specific exercises to improve the motor patterns on that exercise. It's another thing when you're actually coming in and training to fatigue. I think drug-free people who are not on drugs to help with connective tissue should not be lifting weights 6 days a week. And at 35 years old, I'm going to recommend that you not do that. I think you're setting yourself up. If you're pushing yourself to any reasonable degree, you're going to get more issues and need deloads more often. You're going to predispose yourself to overuse injuries of connective tissue. I don't generally recommend that you do it. And I'm not saying some people can't get away with it. I've seen people who can get away with it. I've also seen people who get hurt doing this. Again, I'm going to recommend that you limit yourself to 3 to 4 days a week training as a drug-free lifter, particularly in your 30s. Slow, steady progress with plenty of recovery time wins the game. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.